back to another episode of the Ad Podcast. Today, I have a fun guest for you guys. Gene Freeman is the principal and CEO of Zambezi. Zambezi has twice been named Small Agency of the Year by AdAge and one of the fastest growing companies by the Los Angeles Business Journal. They do iconic work for brands like TaylorMade, Beats by Dre, and Under Armour, to name a few. Gene, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you making the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know we've rescheduled this a few times. So
yeah. No, I'm glad to. I have a little bit more help. I've got a research assistant now, so I can kind of keep pace with the speed in which we're bringing on new guests. Trying to do a show once every business day it's ambitious, but we're getting it done these days. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on. So, we've got a lot of young people that watch the show, people who are interested in getting into the advertising agency world and into marketing in general, especially right now. A lot of kids are coming out of school and having a harder time getting into the industry. So I always love to start off with our guests' origin stories. Maybe tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where you went to school, and what got you thinking about the agency world as a career, and how did you kind of get into the business?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, a great way to start. Everyone's origin story, I feel, is always so unique too, because I think for a lot of people in advertising, I think a common thread you'll probably hear, and you hear from guests previously on your show, is it is a tangential type of experience. Some of us, were like laser set on doing that, and a lot of us were, and I think this is something also as you are a young adult coming out of school and figuring out where you fit best. And all of those learnings and all those experiences really, continue to add, as I've over 20 years now in the business and can kind of look back at my early days. And everything has taught me a really important lesson, whether in the moment it felt like a failure or a roadblock. But yeah, a little bit about me is, so I was unique, that fact that I moved around a lot as a kid, and people commonly then assume if I was in a military family, but similarly my father was in corporate marketing, which has a lot
interesting
also to military families. So by the time I was 15, I had lived in 5 different states and had attended 7 different schools. So I was very used to being in new situations, having to adapt, having to prepare for, change and I do think from a standpoint of like at our core as entrepreneurs, that resiliency and being able to pivot and move into circumstances that are without your control, I think has been a gift for me as I've continued in my career. So my family moved to Orange County, California when I was in high school. And I think by the time my family got to Orange County, they're like, this is pretty great here. Let's just stay there. So my parents are still there 30 years later.
Wow.
But I spent most of my, I would say, late grade school, middle school, early high school in Kansas City. And I did not want to leave Kansas City when I had. So my dad has always described me as his Midwest daughter. And so I think for me, I wanted to really return to the Midwest for school. I went to a great small liberal arts school in Minnesota called Carleton College. And part of that was the, wanting to be at a top academic liberal arts school, but also I played sports. So I was a 3-sport athlete at Carleton. I played basketball, soccer, and tennis. And that really allowed me for the experience that I wanted to have. Now, again, it's totally different now. Youth sports is a whole different subject I could go down a rabbit hole on. But coming out of Carleton, I was actually slated to go into the Peace Corps. And was slated to go to the South Pacific, a few months after graduation. My assignment was postponed due to civil unrest where I was going. And then, I think as a 22-year-old, you're trying to figure out, is this really what I want? I had this plan, it's getting changed. What do I do? And when I was in college, I had internships at professional sports teams. And in marketing departments, and had in my course of that also dealt with external agencies. And I just loved interfacing with the agencies. That I think that's where I really first saw a like-minded aspect of, agency people are figure it out people. There's an issue and a problem, figuring out a way to make it a win. And so as I was kind of contemplating if I wanted to still stay the course on the Peace Corps, I started looking for jobs in Minneapolis. And at the time, Fallon Minneapolis was the top agency, not only in Minneapolis, but within the industry. Fallon was really at its creative apex. And I was lucky enough to get an assistant account executive position, put the Peace Corps to the side, and joined Fallon, in early 2000s. And really enjoyed it. It was, I think if I had not had that exposure to Fallon as not only my first job, but also my first exposure in advertising, I don't think I would be where I am today, because it just was such a unique place where it was familial and putting creative at its core, and also really great people. I met my husband and business partner, Chris Rye, there. We were both starting as junior account people, and was working on the United Airlines account during 9/11. And so I think a pivotal experience of having that a year into the business and being, involved in just something so big that was affecting our whole entire, not only our country, but our world, gave me a lot of experiences I don't think I would have really gotten, on any place else. After a few years of Fallon, I really was intrigued by the client side, and really then focused on that was my next goal that I wanted to do. I really learned a lot at Fallon. So I went to grad school at Northwestern with the idea of moving to the client side. So once I finished at Northwestern, I moved to Portland and eventually got a job at Nike. Was there for a few years. Chris also at the time had left Fallon and had moved to Portland as well, and was working at Wyden. So that was a really unique experience. I was on the consumer insights team within Nike, so I wasn't on the advertising team. And from there, Chris was working on Nike basketball. And his position was brought on specifically right when Nike signed LeBron James. So he was the first account handler really for those early LeBron days. And we look back on it now and just, it's crazy of, LeBron was 17.
He was young coming when he first came into the league and into prominence. Yeah.
And then from there, after a few years in Portland, Kobe Bryant was signed on to Nike as well. And from there, Kobe really became interested in marketing and advertising and approached Chris to start an agency. And he wanted Chris to start an agency in LA and for Chris to run it. And so, the story that Chris and I have told a million times is, Chris came home from work and said, "This is nuts. Kobe wants to start an agency and he wants me to run it." He goes, "I don't know how to do that." And we were 27 at the time. We were very, and my initial approach was, well, we need to figure out a way to do that. What's the worst thing that can happen? It's not successful, and we're highly employable. So we sold our little house in Portland. We had just gotten married, so we were less than a year married, and moved to LA to start Zambezi. And here we are 19 years later, still having Zambezi, run Zambezi. We took over control of the business in 2015. So now we've owned it for the last 10 years. But we've learned so much from that journey from a startup to a mid-sized agency to now, I would say, established in the independent agency ecosystem.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a cool story. And that leads me to so many fun paths to go down. So, we've kind of heard this idea of, celebrity associated agencies, or, you have like the Ryan Reynolds of the world, and, you've got, Tony Hawk and some professional skateboarders and snowboarders down here in San Diego started an agency, and it seems to be kind of a trendy thing. But, I think what's so great about Kobe is like sometimes the things that he was involved in that you don't know about, right? Like this is the first time that maybe this is more widely known in the industry than I maybe should have more of a perception of it, but I wasn't aware of that fact. Would you say that is a common thing that a lot of people know about your origin story, that they kind of start through Chris and your relationship with Kobe? Or is that something where he was more kind of a, behind the scenes champion? And, like, I guess how much was
Mhm.
that important to like the genesis of the agency,
Yeah.
Kobe's, not just his financial support, but his involvement as a creative person and just the
Yeah.
powerhouse that he was as an entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, Kobe has always been ahead of his time. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think as a business person and a visionary, he deserves that credit and should be recognized in that way. So this was 2006. Okay, so I'm dating myself here again. On this is pre-social media, and
Wow.
Kobe's real vision for Zambezi when it started was to control his brand and to then expand it through brand partnerships and having great creative agency, talent behind him in order to tell those stories. So the first project that we worked on was his website, which in 2006, no professional players had websites. He was one of the first. I think Peyton Manning was really the only other one that did. And you can see what Peyton's doing right now with Omaha and like how successful he has been from his brand integrations. But Kobe made it very clear that he always wanted to have his involvement with Zambezi be behind the scenes. He did not want it to be propelled as like this is Kobe's agency. He wanted the work to be done for him, but to not that have be front and center, which I think was very smart. He was in a different phase of his career at that point. Coming into Kobe like 2.0 phase where the Lakers were kind of reassessing their dominance in the NBA and going on additional NBA championships. And so that was very strategic from the get-go. He would have, give us some introductions, but it was really more from a standpoint is he had strategic projects to work on. And then it was the aspect of now it's up to you to find your own business. And we quickly realized we needed to get our own business. So we had some more like regional type of work and we're kind of on a good clip. We had a few employees and then 08, 09 happened. And it's one of those classic small business stories where you're looking at the cash in the bank and we've got 2 payroll runs left. What the F are we going to do? And from there, I think that's also one of the gifts that we really had of like having our backs up against the wall as so significantly as we did in 0809. When Zambezi was originally founded, we did not really claim ourselves to be experts in sports and entertainment, which we are. And I think coming out of 08 and 09, that was the new focus and positioning for the agency, which then really propelled us to bring in clients like 2K Sports, Foot Locker, and Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola at that point, Glasso and Vitamin Water were just coming into the Coca-Cola family, and we really helped bring that visibility to early Vitamin Water days, with of course their cohort of celebrity and athletes that they had. So that focus and us also showing that to the marketplace really allowed that, I would say first wave of growth for Zambezi to happen, which was between 2010 to 2014, 15.
Yeah, I love that. And, not just from your, personal story of being a female athlete and sports player, and then you guys both working at a kind of brands like Nike and your husband actually working on the Kobe business at Wyden. It seems like that has been a theme in just, I just took a brief snippet of brands that you've worked with, but, TaylorMade, Beats, Under Armour, those all are either directly sports brands or have an affinity for sports. And then you also talked about entertainment. Is that kind of based on geography, the fact that you guys are, in Los Angeles, the global hub of entertainment and culture, or
Mhm.
is it playing on that trend of like, athletes as multi hyphenate, media, like athletes are media properties in their own right now, right? Like
Right.
you've got so many athletes that launch their own production companies and do,
Yep.
long form storytelling. Was it kind of based on your proximity to LA, or based on the work that you were doing in sports and kind of how that naturally leads into entertainment clients, or maybe a little bit of both?
I would say a little bit of both. I mean, I think as we know, sports moves culture. And as sports has become more imbued of like, it's not just tune in on Sunday for the NFL, athletes, as you say, are their own media channels. They have really built their own brands and businesses around themselves. And to have a partner that can understand that, how they should be utilized, again, from an authenticity standpoint, knowing what brands are appropriate and not appropriate for certain athletes. And I think the entertainment aspect is really comes down to that, West Coast hustle. And the entertainment industry is quick and tough, and you have to be able to move faster and be ahead of that. So I think just naturally our way of operating through that aspect and it defines who we are. And I think our name comes from the Zambezi shark, which is, we call it a bull shark. And it got its name because it is one of the most adaptable animals on the planet, going from the saltwater of the Indian Ocean up the fresh water of the Zambezi River. So again, it's truly an embodiment of that entrepreneurial hustle and seeing what's next and, doing what we need to do in order to get our next meal.
Yeah, I love that. And you guys have stayed independent as well. Am I right on that
Yep.
you guys are still
Mhm.
independent? Okay.
Yep.
And then I think I read somewhere that Zambezi is actually the largest female-owned independent ad agency in the U.S. How much have you leaned into that idea of being a female-owned agency, and the idea that, especially in sports, female sports is having this amazing moment with, WNBA and Caitlin, and, whether it's tennis stars being maybe more successful and more, or at least bigger brands than some of their male counterparts. It seems like, female sports is having an amazing moment in culture, and kind of not quite equity and parity with their male counterparts, but definitely more visibility and more partnership opportunities than maybe ever before. Have you guys been able to lean into your female ownership as kind of a way to, also dovetail into those types of storytelling opportunities?
Yes. And I'm proud to say that at one point we were the largest women-owned agency. Like, there have been so many other agencies now that have come to the forefront that can take that mantle and move it forward. And that's how I kind of view it, is like there's room for all of us in order to grow and to applaud and support each other. And that goes into, I founded an organization in 21 with another woman agency owner, Christy Heiler, who owns Cornet. We founded an organization called Own It. And really that the genesis of that was first asking the question of how many women-owned agencies are there out there? And truthfully, that data isn't readily available. We went to the 4As, they didn't really have it. And so we decided to create our own. And so we have a database of over 600 agencies. Untilyouownit.com, you can see all the women-owned agencies that are part of our network. But really the idea is also, it's like to form a community, to give support, to give visibility. Christy has a podcast that features women owners. And that has been also something that we have committed to from an industry perspective of like, it's great for everybody. As more we can talk about women-owned agencies, the more that we can support each other from that aspect. And we've had we had an in-person summit earlier this year in LA. We had over 250 owners attend. It was a fabulous event, and the feedback that we got from attendees was, this rivaled content that they're seeing across the board from an industry perspective. So we're very proud of that initiative. I think it's something that's desperately needed. And to the larger point of women's sports, women's sports are having a moment, but women's sports has been over here grinding for a long time to get the visibility that is deserved. And so it's not an overnight thing. It's from a standpoint of brands stepping up to the table, investing in leagues, investing in media, because it's a circle. they need to have investment in order for the teams to have visibility to pay the teams a wage. So then they also don't have to have a second job, because their job as a woman, as a female athlete, does not support them. And I think from a standpoint of, we have a very, large record of shooting with the best and the brightest in the industry. We did work with Caitlin Clark with ESPN for their documentary, Full Court Press, last year, through our studio, doing promos for that, which was nominated for a Sports Emmy. So that was one of the highlights.
Congrats.
For sure. But yes, women's sports are having a moment, and I think they're going to continue to have moments. And again, it's having the understanding of the athlete as being the broadcast channel, and now with NIL that's coming up, the rules are being rewritten in terms of how athletes can monetize themselves and their own ability. So I think it's a really exciting time for sports marketing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like with the NIL situation, it's not always, the player who's the most gifted or skilled on the court or happens to go to a school that has, a big Division I program. It's more about, are they a great storyteller? Can they communicate with an audience? Can they build a loyal fan base? Some of the biggest NIL influencers are volleyball players at Division III schools, because they've figured out how to be, not just an athlete, but also a creator, an influencer, a storyteller, whatever you want to call it. So it kind of democratizes the monetization element of, maybe taking a little bit from, some of the things that would traditionally be evaluated, which maybe is just pure statistics, performance, and skill, and what school did you go to, and what kind of visibility did you have in traditional media, now to being able to, tell stories on behalf of your school, on behalf of your teammates, and behalf of potential partners.
Yep. It's very similar. Understanding the emerging media landscape is a differentiator, to your point. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the captain. You have to be the most creative in understanding the platform. And I think that just also goes to, almost 20 years ago with Kobe understanding what websites and the power of the internet to tell stories could do. And so the athletes and people that take advantage of that, they're in a really strong position to further themselves and options for what they want to do in their career.
Yeah. And again, Kobe being such a innovator, like you mentioned in 2006, essentially the idea of him wanting to start an agency, not necessarily to be a name on the wall and have it be about himself, but it was really just, he wanted to be the primary client. He wanted to control these brand partnerships that he was doing with Nike and others. He wanted to be able to essentially control his own image and be involved in the work and be a steward of his own creative brand, and not have to put that completely in the control of third parties that maybe didn't understand his brand as well as he did.
Yep.
I love it. All right. I'd love to spend a little bit more time on Own It, because I think it's a fascinating topic. In my last agency business development role, I worked for a female founder for 8 years. Of the two agencies, I can only compare it to, 5 years with one agency, 8 years with other. But, I think there were parts of the first agency that was owned by a man that were interesting and still fun and exciting. But the 8 years that I spent with the CEO of my last agency, I would say if I had to pick one or the other, I would definitely have picked the female-owned agency. I think there was more of a partnership, between me as the chief revenue officer and her. There was more trust. I really talk about it as 8 years of not having any drama in my life. Don't get me wrong, we worked really hard. We worked late sometimes, worked weekends, but it was, a lot of it was about how do we get our work done and get through, the tough times, so then we can have a better quality of living. I was lucky enough to be able to have her go on 3 6-month maternity leaves, where I essentially ran the agency while she was gone, so she could, have her kids and spend time with them. And, The other thing that I think is, I always tell people that's really funny. I never, I never negotiated her for a salary increase the way that I did at my prior company, where I would shop an offer and like have a really, contentious negotiation for like, salary increases and raises, because she just always treated me so well and so respectful that I just never felt like I could do that to her. I just couldn't ever, be aggressive in my negotiating style with her. But just so much of like what I would consider, like, I don't know, just more of a familial, relationship amongst us and our team. I think that's the only way that's the only word that comes to mind. So I was always a fierce advocate of pointing out a statistic that I found out, that of the Fortune 1000, only 1% of them have agency of records that are owned by females. Might be, holding companies aren't really owned by one gender or the other, but with how many CMOs are women, and how much you see kind of the LinkedIn like women's empowerment conference or women's empowerment awards, why do you think there's such a stark difference between the amount of CMOs who are female, who champion female leadership and empowerment, but then when you look at the agency makeup and how many of them hire female-owned agencies, there's still a pretty stark delta. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to do better?
Yeah. I think there's a multitude of factors of it. And at the end of the day, while we position ourselves as whoever owns it, or like who owns it from its, shareholder, individual, private equity backed, a CMO needs to make a decision on what's best for their business and bring in agencies that have the appropriate skill set. So again, it's a conversation starter. The fact that one of the largest women-owned agencies, but it's not the thing that seals the deal. Your team seals the deal. Like what work you create, what services you provide, and so that's always the thing too. Of like, at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding of what you create. Now, a lot of times it's about visibility. And so if you look at the roster of, over 600 agencies that are in our database, majority of them are very small. And so then that is the idea of how can we help these agencies scale and grow? How can we help them with their new biz practices? How can we help them with their MSA negotiations? A lot of agencies, in those phases of going from 1 million to 5 million, it's a tricky road, because how you started and then how you scale can really kind of transform and change the embodiment of what you are. So really with Own It Too, that's what we're here to provide, is that community to other women agency owners that have like, yeah, I've gone through that transition, or yes, I've worked with this client before. This is a good accountant to use. So it forms, again, a network. And I think, as opposed to not feeling like you're on an island, I know that in my early days, and I think at times this is also an entrepreneurial kind of mentality, is, well, I can do it. I can figure it out. I don't need the help. Look at you, Dylan, talking about your podcast of like, I'm putting out a podcast today and I finally am hiring some people. The mentality we have is, if I just grind, I'll be able to figure this out. But true scaling requires community and a network to be able to kind of prop you up and put you out to market as well. So, historically, if you kind of also look at advertising trades, they have a tendency to really focus more on larger agencies. Now, I do think the tide is shifting, and I think, and I've been saying this for a few years coming out of COVID, there's never been a better time to be an independent agency, because CMOs are looking for options. They're looking for solutions, but you're not going to be the solution because you're women owned. You're going to be the solution because you understand their business problems and you have the people and the approach in order to get them from, A to B.
Yeah, I love that. The CEO of my last agency, I always would try and push her into doing, these female founder forums, and just things to lean into that, because as the business development person, I always wanted whatever edge I could bring to a pitch or the table. But so often she just wanted to be known as an entrepreneur and a founder, not a female founder. But I think over time, her thinking about that shifted, even if it was just purely like having that strategic edge. But when I think about you and your co-founder of Own It's journey, um, you guys did this when you were already recognized as one of the largest female-owned ad agencies. You had already gone through those scaling stories and figured it out, and maybe it was because you had a good informal network of colleagues and friends that you could call upon and trade advice and stories, and maybe this was the formalization of that. But to some degree it feels very selfless because you kind of did this after you already had figured out a lot of these answers on your own to provide an opportunity for the next generation or these smaller agencies that are coming up. And it feels maybe it's just the right thing to do, but it feels like you're almost giving more than you're getting out of it. Am I wrong in that? Do you get quite a bit back as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I wasn't doing what I love business. And so I
Hmm.
can talk business strategy, whether you're the flower shop on the corner or a new agency in Seattle trying to, compete against Amazon. So at the end of the day, business principles, there's a lot of things that can be applicable depending on your industry. I'm very involved in National Association of Women Business Owners, which gives me the expansive view outside of just outside of advertising. But the fact of the matter is, there are from like 2020 to present, like one of the fastest growing sectors of business ownership is women-owned businesses. They're opening them at historic rates because, as we're seeing, the corporate environment is not meant for a lot of people to be successful. It is structured. It hasn't evolved. I think it's very interesting coming out of COVID, how we're, return to work and how that looks like and how that gets monitored. But I would say, seeing people being successful in business is something that really fills me, from that standpoint. And again, I believe in the standpoint that like there's enough business for everybody. Sure, we might pitch against each other from once in a while. And I do think that's a maturity aspect. I think if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I'd be like, no, that business is mine. I don't want to help anybody. So maybe I'm kind of entering, maybe I'm probably growing up from that aspect. But the advertising, less than 1% of agencies in this industry are owned by women. Like that's a dismal statistic. I was really involved with 3% when that started, and Kat Gordon getting that, taking it from 3% of the industry creative directors to almost 50% by the time that
Wow.
went on to her next thing. So I saw that evolution ahead of that. It was a great guide of this is good for everybody. The more that we can educate and let CMOs know of this vast network of women-owned agencies and what they can offer, that's good. That's good for everybody and provides collaboration.
I love that. You talked a little bit about the structural reasons and why females are doing more entrepreneurial things now. And, talking about the idea that kind of the corporate structure doesn't provide the opportunities for advancement for women around, I'm guessing you're talking about, kind of life moments, deciding that you want to have a family and other components. But why do you think? What do you think is wrong with kind of the corporate structure in which women have to like literally go out and become a business owner versus kind of taking that traditional career path around the idea of like wanting to have a family and wanting to have balance and have more opportunities with their kids to be around their children? And do you think post COVID we are headed in the right direction, or has the freedom that COVID created around work from home and some of these more flexible arrangements, is that starting to dissipate with the return to the office mandates and other things that are happening around kind of going back to the way things were?
Yeah. So listen, there's no perfect work solution, and I think no matter what you're doing, you're coming against obstacles that you have to figure out that is right for you and for your family. Um, and for me, I am a small business person. Like I said earlier, I spent a few years at Nike, and I quickly realized I'm not meant for a large organization, matrix organization. It was too complex, and it just didn't make sense in my simple-minded brain of like the quickest way to get to A to B is to do A to B, not to do all these other things. So it was fascinating for me, to see people spending more time on not doing the work, but to manage the politics and the egos in order to get the work done. So that's me. I'm speaking from that perspective. And so that's what I also think too. A lot of times we have to be really honest with ourselves of what we're really good at and what we're not. Because I think a lot of times too, that can be with self-awareness, you can put yourself then in a situation where you thrive to what you want to do in your career. So I think that's step one of kind of understanding, because a lot of times, as you know, having your own business is no cakewalk.
No, not at all.
And it's harder in a lot of different ways. But for some people, having that control, at least it's you're owning your own stress as opposed to having it be put on you by something. A lot of people choose that route, even though you end up probably having more stress and maybe not, it might not be as profitable in the early days. So I just think it's more of the reality of like what you're expecting out of it. But I think and I have also evolved a lot too in my, owning the business for the past 10 years. Pre-COVID, like we did things a lot differently. COVID forced us to change, and also forced me as a leader to evaluate of like, wait, maybe we can do some things differently. Maybe that's okay to admit, like, sorry, I didn't quite realize in how we were working and structured. Maybe we can do it in ways moving forward. I mean, case in point, like we have an office now in Minneapolis, and Chris and I moved back to Minneapolis coming out of COVID. And now we've got a small office here. We have about 10 people here. Headquarters of Zambezi is still in LA. But that was really a lifestyle change. And then seeing that there's an opportunity, this great creative talent here in the Twin Cities. But I do think, again, like the 08-09 financial crisis that we weathered through forced us to evaluate and change the way we were operating some ways. And then, the business goes in different directions. So I also think that's part of it as well. A lot of times when you're starting off, especially as a new entrepreneur, you're getting a lot of advice coming at you too, right? You got to do it this way. Do it this way. This is the right way to do it. Well, you can't do it like that. That doesn't make any sense. And it takes a while to build a confidence in yourself to make calls that you actually have the wherewithal to make your own decisions, and kind of, yes, you can take the advice from your network and from your people, but forging your own path on your entrepreneurial journey, because that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur is there's no right way to do it. It's very unique and it's very specific. And a lot of times it just takes a minute to kind of get there. And as you know, like most startups fail before year 3 because they run out of cash. So you get past year 3, you know what you're doing. You have
your stride.
Yeah, from that standpoint. So I have always just really loved coaching, whether it's women, whether it's, mid-career, helping them kind of understand and talk through what is next. Again, I think I'm like a business therapist or something, but that I feel truly is at your core, trying to ascertain like what you really want, and then putting yourself in a scenario and company that can kind of give you those things at different phases in your career.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned another trend, which is the great migration that's happened post-COVID, California losing over 400,000 people in the latest census. Do you miss LA, or do you feel, is it exciting being back in the Twin Cities? I've talked to other agency leaders that run shops that are in the Midwest or have Midwestern offices, and they feel like it gives them a little bit of a wider aperture out of kind of the bi-coastal New York, LA hype that we can get stuck in sometimes, and actually like think about, okay, like there's this big swath of people in between these two coasts that buy a lot of products too. Right. Does it give you well, first of all, how long have you been so now, like since COVID, like a few years now? Yeah,
21, so it was 4 years.
Nice. And are you loving it? Are you missing LA? Do you get to come back enough to where it feels like you get the best of both worlds?
I get the best of both worlds. I'm in LA a lot, January through March, so
When it's cold.
it's really cold here. But yeah, again, I think the thing that from the West Coast, LA is that innovative spirit. That is the thing that California can own and forever, is that the spirit, the can-do aspect of like, yes, that's possible. Yes, I believe in that. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, California is the best for that. And so I think that from having aspects of what you're saying too, of yes, the coastal thing is real. And
Mhm.
as our country becomes more polarized, more to the edges, having connection to different aspects of the country, I do think is important, because I think it can really help us be the best partner that we can be for our brands. We're, operating in a very, very crowded and just a tough environment right now.
Yeah, totally. All right. I want to, flip over to the wouldn't be a marketing podcast if we wouldn't didn't talk about AI. Sorry to do it to you, but I have to.
Of course.
So the advertising landscape is shifting quite a bit with AI. I think influencer marketing and creator culture is not just something that agencies have leverage, but it's also something that they have to compete with. Creators are kind of these, self-contained producer, editor, creators, and even on-screen talent who can create content on a shoestring budget. How are you guys innovating and adapting in the world of these two disruptive channels, both AI and creator culture? How are you guys leveraging them to become more nimble? And do you have any kind of practical applications that agency owners of where you guys have applied AI and it's been impactful for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think as an independent company, specifically in advertising, right? I mean, I mentioned just at the beginning part of like in our early days, it's like we were building websites pre-social media. We have a lot of things, if you just look at it from a higher level, that have come in and disrupted how we do business, and new channels and new things to have to learn. So I just think that's inherent in who we are. If you're going to be successful in this industry, there's always new things that are coming in. Now, AI is coming in at such a speed that I don't think anyone really kind of, could see the positive benefits for it. We're developing a tool, like a proprietary tool right now that we can use really to kind of help ascertain brands of where they are in their journey. Like I said, we're unique. If you look at our overall brand set, we have very established global Fortune 100 companies, Google, Under Armour, Apple, as well as emerging brands like Once Upon a Farm, Honest. So that I like that mix. Health Aid Kombucha. We have a nice mix of brands. And I think because we have the experience of running global brands, we also have the right to help emerging brands get to that enterprise level. So really what we're doing is we're developing an AI tool that can really be utilized in that way, help middle market companies reach enterprise status. So going from 500 million to $1 billion, we should be rolling it out in the next month or two. And again, I think it really was in line with our updated view of where we are best served is building billion-dollar brands and our history of doing that. So again, I think AI, again, it can use it to what you do. I just think there's such the panic of, well, I have to know everything about AI. Utilize AI where it is most applicable for you and your agency that no one else can do. So that is always, again, I think it's a strategic decision on how best to apply it. So that's how we're doing it as an example, developing our own tool. At the same point, in terms of efficiency, right? We're having lots of conversations with clients about efficiency, what tools we are using, what tools they are using. I also find we have a vast array of clients too that are on the spectrum of we want you to use AI, and then we have clients that are like, we don't want you to use AI at all. So it is just emerging from that aspect, and you need to have multiple ways to work and test. But again, at the end of the day, the agencies who are going to win in AI are going to be the ones that are most curious about AI. And so you gotta keep that approach. I've also view it as from a standpoint of viewing, investment in diversity. Like, have we ever really completed or been like, yep, I'm good on diversity, check that box. So no, I just view it as like it's a pathway. AI is going to be continued that pathway of like you just need to continue to invest and learn and be curious, and that mindset is the thing that's going to be the most successful for you.
Yeah, I love that. I can't wait to see the tool that you guys are launching and how that rolls out, because that's a pretty awesome brand proposition of how to take.
Maybe we'll come back on
Yeah,
the podcast and we can
let's
do
do
a
it.
demo of it and
That
show you.
that that would be so cool. Well, definitely sign me up for that. I want to give you a chance to give kudos or shout out any recent work or campaign wins and acknowledge your team. Anything that you brought to market or any big wins on the new business side that you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at our heart, we are a creative agency. We started as, ex Fallon, ex Wyden. We are a creative company that has continued to morph into a full service agency with robust offerings from the media and production side. Like I noticed our production studio, Finn, is a multi, Emmy nominated production company, as well as Scale, our media entity, winning Adweek Breakthrough Media Agency of the Year. So coupled with that, with our creative strengths, is a pretty compelling package, and we can operate in a bunch of different ways. We have a really great client partner in LPL Financial.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that work. I'm trying to remember who the celebrity was.
Anna
It's some.
Kendrick.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was awesome.
So
Yeah, and God.
I think that's a great example of Zambezi at our best. So that is an integrated client, both media and creative. And LPL is the leading. There's actually there's a investor section of the Wall Street Journal today. They are the #1 independent advisor in the country.
Yeah.
But no one's
You're
ever
in San Diego, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they have not actively advertised for a reason. And so new CEO has come in and really seen the potential of what building that brand can do. They've been they've really lofty continued growth goals and have made some pretty significant acquisitions in the past year. So that is really exciting to work on an established brand that has never really had a brand moment on an integrated capacity to tell that story and help craft that. As you know, these opportunities are very few and far between in this business, and so we are very proud of that work. And specifically with the selection of Anna Kendrick, bringing that to LPL, negotiating those terms of the deal. We don't always negotiate terms in terms of like from a celebrity standpoint. This one we did. To bring it to light from that aspect. So, and I think also too, it's so differentiated from the market in terms of financial services advertising, which is kind of the point. You need to have it be standout and differentiated. So to be able to have Anna Kendrick be that embodiment of a sophisticated, refined person as well as approachable. We wanted to have both of those and not have it seem like, having it be very true to the brand and from a messaging perspective of bringing LPL to market. So that was what we were really excited about that just launched. And then also we have a new client in Liquid IV that worked with them to do like their first ever complete Times Square takeover this summer, bringing more of that idea of a hydration moment at 4:00, rebranding at IV o'clock, and then having that then be imbued in from a paid media advertising. So you're seeing that just literally from a 4 p.m. standpoint, having IV o'clock being rebranded as your time to rehydrate. So I think those are two great examples of showing the combo of creative media comms and then also flawless production execution. That's the other thing that we have is, TaylorMade Golf has been a longtime client of ours. They have the top golfers in the industry. Nelly Korda, Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy. We shoot them, every year for content year after year. We know how to work in those scenarios. We know how to work with the biggest and the brightest in all industries flawlessly and from an execution standpoint. So again, really proud of the work that we've done year after year for TaylorMade.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, those are great examples. So last question, and I think you're in a unique seat to answer this one. We talked a little bit about it at the front of the show, but what advice would you give to young creatives, especially women who want to either break into the advertising agency space, or what advice would you give to women who maybe have that inkling of wanting to start their own agency? Where would you tell them to take the first step?
Those are two separate questions. So I'll start with the advertising industry first. I mean, again, I think it's an industry that's shifting so rapidly. So the best thing you can do is to give yourself information and experience. Understanding who the big players are, understanding who are the brands, what work are you doing, and then it seems simple from that aspect of like knowing who people are. But I remember being an assistant account executive starting at Fallon and having people explain to me the holding company structure and what is what, and I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, oh my god, I didn't even know that. So for a lot of things, what we find so basic as an executive standpoint, it's reaffirming like the foundational educational aspect, because without the knowledge, you can't have an opinion. So that is the thing. And we want you to have an opinion, but you first need to have an understanding of at least where that opinion is kind of coming from. So again, it's the stay curious aspect. Juniors, when we're looking for that, we're not looking for like schools or, maybe internships from a standpoint. It's how they show up in the room. Are they the most curious? Are they asking really great questions? Can you tell that they have the enthusiasm that they just they just want to be a part of it? That is critical. Like when you're entering in, it's the attitude, as long as also showing that you're doing your homework. And then for starting your own agency, I think that's been also a great thing to see with Own It, because we have seen women who have been mid-career and have been in other agencies who have taken the plunge over the last few years and started an agency. And having Own It as a reference point that they can reach out to and have conversations is a great thing, because at the end of the day, an agency is a service business. So the capital that's required to start it is really not significant, and so you can really test and learn in terms of services, offerings, how you're doing it, how you're structuring. A lot of people don't like it that I say this, but it's more like, you can moonlight. This is like starting an agency is something that you can moonlight in your current gig to figure out if you have the ability to kind of see it through. Do you like it? Because as you know, Dylan, like running your own thing is different than being a part of a larger machine. So it's a really easy way to start to baby step into seeing if you have the capacity to run an agency or own an agency, if that's something that you want to do. I've had a few friends over the past few years who have kind of taken the jump, done that, and then have also realized, oh, I actually don't want to manage people. That's also part of the journey as well. Like, okay, so you don't want to manage people. So either you bring someone in to manage the people, or you have to figure out how to recalibrate. So there's always something new that you're learning when you are through an entrepreneurial endeavor. And I think just starting is sometimes the hardest part, and like figuring out as you go.
Yeah, I love that. Let your side hustle become your main hustle. No reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and there's enough time in the day to at least get started and do some proof of concepting before you fully quit the day job. So I think that's prudent advice and very valid. So all right, Gene, well, really appreciate getting the opportunity to catch up with you today. I want to give you an opportunity to send folks to anything you want to plug, or send people to connect with you on social media. Where would you like people to go if they saw this interview and it resonated with them and they want to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say LinkedIn's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I think that's Dylan, how you reached out to me via LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So I would say that, and then also just checking out our work at Zambezi, zmbz.com, and really, because that's I think the thing that I'm looking for too is constant feedback of the work that we're creating, how we're presenting ourselves, so we can continue to get better and better from that standpoint. So yeah, I would say those are the two best ways to get in touch.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your morning with me today. For those who are watching all around at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe wherever you happen to be watching so you can see more exciting interviews with great executives like Gene. If you are listening to the show, give us a positive review on whatever platform you're listening. That's how we find a larger audience organically. Last but not least, if there's a creative person in your life or a female who is, struggling at doing it alone and chipping away at her business or her agency, maybe you can share some of the interview about the Own It stuff. And then last but not least, if there's just a marketer or somebody out there who you think would enjoy the conversation that I had with Gene today, don't forget to share the show. With that, Gene, I will let you go. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Awesome.